These are the school districts. This is Iowa, and we did 11 school districts. I contacted them via Zoom, and I'm going to pass this off to Colleen because we're kind of going to go back and forth.
So the funding cycle is the calendar year of 2022, and about 3 weeks after the grant started, the governor of Iowa announced a registered apprenticeship grant, two-pronged, one prong for high school students to become paras, and the other prong for para educators to become teachers, and all relief dollars. And so that's important to note for some backdrop and context, because Lynn's work on this grant, there's confluence then of where the need and urgency was coming. This came out of the blue in a State of the State address, but really started our minds working around how to best communicate and get that need from these districts and how we can best develop programming to serve in that way as an institute of higher ed.
This is the number of teachers in these districts, and you can see they range from very small to the very large. This is the number of para-educators in those districts, and those are the people we're targeting. And I just wanted to put this up. This is diversity for Iowa. A lot of people think that Iowa is white bread, totally, and it really isn't anymore. I mean, the diversity has increased a lot, just like it has across the nation. And you can see, and this is the same order of those districts here. So the first one is a settlement school. It's totally Meskwaki, so it's like 98% Meskwaki. And that's why the diversity is so high there. But you can see we've got high and low. These, this came from the initial conversation. What are your teacher needs? What are you struggling with to fill? And you can see the vast majority of them are in yellow. Those are special ed teachers. That is not a surprise. And ELL, then you have the rest of those. And there were a couple of people that said, oh, I need music, I need an art, but there were like, those were just one people, so we just didn't even count those. So one of the things that I was doing is working with those school districts and talking to them about what they need and talking about our para-educator pipeline, which I'll talk about in a minute, but also working with community colleges to work with the high school to either high school to para or high school associate's degree to the university, and trying to do some transfer equivalencies so that they could matriculate faster through the teacher ed program and spend less money. And in doing that, there are some schools that aren't close to community colleges, so I'm working with them on MOUs for their teacher academies to help them matriculate through the teacher prep program at the University of Northern Iowa too. 5 of the districts work with DMACC. That's one of the central community colleges in Iowa, and we have a new articulation agreement with them that's going to help everyone. And 3 districts will be entering into that MOU.
Go to the next one.
This is, okay,
Yeah.
this one.
No, go to the next one. Okay. So while Lynn is out on her road show around talking to our colleagues in rural and urban across the state as part of this grant work, a lot has happened since the registered apprenticeship grant was announced in the state. And so under our colleague, say hi, Robin. Our colleague, Robin Data, who is leading the faculty effort, is that we've worked very hard to develop a pathway specific for paraeducators where there is no requirement to come to Cedar Falls and do residential work, and to take really existing curriculum, identify the jigsaw puzzle pieces of that existing curriculum in elementary and special education, and then throw it up and have it fall back down into naturally coupling content modules of 8-week terms and doing that online for 2 years. And so what we've developed is what we call the Purple Pathway for paraeducators, which is elementary and special education, all online, honoring the time in the classroom. And so we're calling that practice-based, in that the time in the classroom as employment, how do we honor that as clinical experience in and of itself? What we know in the program we're designing is that prior to student teaching, paraeducators will have 2,400 clock hours in a classroom setting. Our traditional undergraduates have 80 hours prior to student teaching, and that's a lot still. We boast that we're in the classrooms early and often, but 80 hours versus 2,400, very different story. So we're really trying to flip the script, if you will, on how to utilize the workplace as that clinical setting. So I have like breaking news. It's so exciting because this actually happened during lunch. So I was at some tables where prior to lunch, this didn't happen. We have known that we have needed state board of approval for this pathway because of the substantial difference of flipping it fully online. What we didn't know is that we needed that approval prior to accepting applicants. So, where's Alex? In terms of advocacy, we pulled every lever we had to get on today's State Board of Education agenda. And our colleague, Director of Educator Prep, was in Des Moines, and so the very good news is that this Purple Pathway was approved this morning. Yay. And the question was, well, how many can you take? And we said, well, we don't have a cap. We don't have a cap. We're really excited and prepared for the registered apprenticeship announcement, which then came out an hour later. And so it's exciting. Do you have I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head.
No, it was supposed to be 100 high school to para, 100, and they were funding 100 paras to educators, which is like a drop in the bucket. Mm-hmm. That's why we were developing this Purple Pathway, right, for all the other people that don't have that program.
I think the numbers they're very close, is that today it was announced that 136 districts of the 340 or so in Iowa will be served, and it's a $45 million initiative that goes directly to the schools for that incentive-based pay, and we have a Purple Pathway ready to accept those folks. If you do a comparison, I think they were going to do $7 to $9 million. That's right. Originally. And they had such an overwhelming thrust from districts, they said, we're going to fund them all. And so it went from 9 to 143. Yeah. Anyway. So as we've heard earlier, we know this is an influx, right? These are relief dollars, and we know that there's going to be an initial surge. And part of the work that Lynn's doing on this grant, and that we're working very closely with our faculty, is, so then how do we sustain this? How do we continue to build those partnerships with the community, with our school districts? We're very lucky to have strong principalship and superintendency programs in our Ed Prep program as well. So how do we use our entire network to then keep this pathway available and create further pathways for that? As an avenue to become a teacher. I think one of the challenges still is funding, because we have to support these people. That's it. So you are like up to date on what we are doing. Thank you.
That's me. That's a tough act to follow. I don't know that I have such big announcements today. So our focus is to create a pipeline of rural teacher preparation, diversify the pipeline. So we're really focused on our rural schools in Indiana, and we're trying to diversify through the Hispanic or Latinx population in Indiana. The latest census showed that it's the biggest growing rural demographic in Indiana. And right now, the numbers aren't great for us. A little bit about CEL. So we're kind of a different organization. We're associated with a higher ed, but we're not higher ed. We're a nonprofit, kind of like a think tank, like New America, where we try to find best practices around the country, bring them back to Indiana, and kind of scale them up. So GYO is definitely one that we're interested in. Kind of our bread and butter is early college high schools. So we really support a network of early colleges throughout Indiana. We show them how to do it, we provide the training, and we're also the body that's been assigned by our Commission for Higher Education for accrediting the early colleges. So doing a GYO, especially in the high school setting, really fits well with us because we're already supporting schools to create those pathways. We also have several others where we have a collaborative for rural education, which is the superintendents in our rural school districts. So that's what I do. I work with them in implementing these programs. STEM Teach, we have ISEAL and some of these others where we actually are credentialing current teachers to be dual credit teachers. We have ISEAL, which is a program for SPED teachers, and we're also going to be starting, hopefully soon, an ESL program. So CEL will be working with all of our institutions of higher ed in Indiana to be able to provide these credentials for teachers. A little bit about Indiana and why we're doing rural. Indiana, about a third of our population is from a rural school district, so it is very large. We're the 8th largest rural population in the country, so we have quite a few students in the state that are doing it. The college going rate for rural is going down. It's been trending down even before the pandemic, and our Commission for Higher Ed just today released our latest college going rates, and it's the worst in I don't know how long. It's terrible right now. So that's something that we're trying to address. And we do have a lower than national average for the poverty rate. So some of our rural students, socioeconomically are doing okay. The other thing with our rural districts, many of them, like all districts, can't fill teachers, fill staff, paras, things like that. Rural school districts in Indiana have a much lower salary schedule as well. Recent legislation, I think last year actually, all salaries have to be bumped up in Indiana. So hopefully that might address some of the things, but we'll see. Early learning, and I kind of give some of this background to show you something in a minute. Early learning in Indiana, especially rural, is you can't find early learning centers. You can't find daycares. That's a workforce problem in rural parts of Indiana. Most often you're using a church or a relative, so if you can't get consistent daycare, you can't consistently go to work. So we're trying to figure out ways to expand early learning in Indiana. So our rural early college network is kind of the bulk of the work for this. So we have 20 rural school districts spread throughout Indiana that we're trying to support in developing their early college. And then we're also trying to define how expensive it costs to do an early college. Because if we can define, here's exactly what you need to do in early college, here's exactly what it costs to do in early college, we can put a package together, hopefully, and provide that. We go from 261 students in the high school all the way up to about 1,500. And 1,500 is actually Logansport High School, which is also 50% Hispanic. So here I show you some of the numbers for our Hispanic population, because that's one of them that we're trying to focus on. So we got them, again, throughout the state. The disadvantaged percentages are high for most of them. So we're really focusing on those. With Logansport, again, having the highest Hispanic population, I think in the state, in their Grow Your Own program, they don't have any Hispanic students. So that's something that we're working on trying to focus on. And it's actually one of the oldest GYO programs in the state as well, and still don't have any Hispanic students. So what we've learned so far, we created a spectrum of what we think for Grow Your Own, using some of our current models, the research. Where can we pull students? Where can we pull people from the pipeline into the school? So this is something CEL has been working with, even sharing teachers across districts to kind of fill those high need areas until we can get this pipeline filled out. We looked at different models around the state, and this is one of the better ones that we've been able to pull out and share with our school districts. So if you can cleanly, succinctly put a pathway together, visually show it to people, it makes things easier. I mean, that's just something that I think many of us overlook, just the simplicity of a one-pager that you can communicate with parents. And they're like, oh, now I see they got to go here, here, and here, and we're good to go. So that's something that we're sharing. We created this kind of our start of a logic model on what we're thinking about and how to pull students, where to leverage your GYO students or cadet teachers. One of the things that we have noticed with some of the current GYO programs or cadet teaching is the programs just become print these papers, pass out the papers. We're really trying to work with these programs to make them very thoughtful, impactful, that kids want to continue in teaching, that it's not a boring profession. If you're just giving them boring work, it's a boring profession. So we're looking at that. And then, yeah, so these are kind of our goals over the next year or so. We're trying to increase the GYO programs, increase the quality of the GYO programs, increase the diversity in these programs. Even in the high diverse districts that we have, the diversity in the program isn't very much. One of the other things, so recently after getting awarded the funding, I connected with our Department of Education, and they're also focused on GYO. So we were able to actually leverage this grant to team up and try to do some planning with them. So during the month of June, we're doing GYO summits throughout the state, 3 different locations. So next week and the week after will actually be our rural-focused summits that we're bringing in a lot of school districts to participate in planning. It's a 2-day thing. We share models the first day, and then the next day is kind of workshop to plan how you can implement your GYO. And then there will be monthly communities of practice that CEL will be working with some of the school districts on. So, and the other thing that we leveraged this grant for was with the Rural Schools Collaborative and trying to start a rural teacher corps. So we're hoping to launch one of those, and we got some additional funding to focus on current college students to incentivize them to go back to rural through stipends, curriculum that supports rural education. So that's it.
Okay, so I'm with Mississippi State University, and our grant essentially, like yours, was to take the idea of a Think and Action Tank and bring it to the state level. And so we already had an established GYO program. We began with what we called the Professional Advancement Network for Teacher Assistants. And simply all that was partnering with local school districts in terms of recruiting teacher assistants into the teacher prep program at Mississippi State. We adjusted the way that we scheduled classes, the way that we delivered classes, and the way that we handled field experience for those students. Really wasn't about funding for tuition or that kind of thing. It was just about accessibility. Now, we did a lot of things to help with financial aid in the sense of I had all of our teacher assistants meet with the director of financial aid, and he made sure they were leveraging every single opportunity that was available to them. I insisted on having that level of intervention because that person also knew about the special pockets of money that nobody else knew about that could be made available to them. That also expanded into our participation in the Mississippi Teacher Residency. Our state has a state department-led teacher residency, and we're actually in the second iteration of that process. And so basically our goal was we have myself, Dr. Operton, who's here with us. She's in Ed Leadership. Brandy Summerall, who is our instructor in special education, and then Melissa Wyndham, who is in counselor education. to help us to kind of develop these convenings and help people understand the pipelines we already have established, but then also meet with those people to talk about how can we serve them better, how can we expand, all those types of things. So the context in Mississippi, we're actually on the branch campus of Mississippi State. And branch campuses are kind of in a unique place with the advent of online instruction and all of that kind of thing. Our campus had been dwindling in enrollment. When I was hired in 2016, we were down to around 400 students on our campus. We have more than doubled that in recent years, and a big component of that has been the expansion in our education programs on our campus. So initially, we're serving East Central Mississippi. We have pivoted to focus on serving school districts across the state through niche, specially designed initiatives like our PANTA initiative, the teacher residency, and that kind of thing. Mississippi also currently has, and I missed saying this, we're now serving 30 counties across Mississippi through our initiatives. Mississippi currently has 15 community colleges throughout the state. One's right next door to us, and we have formalized partnership agreements with 4 of those. GYO has created these active partnerships with 6 specific school districts to provide direct support for their initiatives. Articulation agreements between community colleges recently have been expanded to include a new Bachelor of Applied Science. So we've been working on leveraging that specifically to create a pipeline that goes from a technical program at a community college. Specifically, we've been looking at the early childhood education technical program at the community college. We have already done a meeting with all the faculty across the state in those programs, and we've developed a specific, basically an advising guide that takes them from the community college curriculum to the Bachelor of Applied Science at Mississippi State, then leading into an alternate route program to teacher certification at the graduate level. And the really cool thing about it is 100% of the technical credit comes into the Bachelor of Applied Science. And then we've leveraged it where during their last semester of their senior year, 9 hours of initial licensure classes for a temporary license count to complete the bachelor's degree and also count towards the master's degree. So it's a Thrive in 5 program. They can have a master's degree in a total of 5 years doing the program. Yeah. And so we have population in Lauderdale County where our branch campus is located, 72,000. About 1,800 businesses employ over 29,000 individuals. Our estimated poverty rate in the area is 22.5%. And then we have 2 major school districts local to our branch campus, one a county school and the other a municipal, serving 10,000 public school students, and then there's additionally 4 private schools in that immediate area. In September 2021, it was reported that the state of Mississippi had over 3,000 certified teacher vacancies across the state, over 900 of those in elementary education specifically. In the congressional district where our main campus and our branch campus resides represents 40% of those statewide teacher vacancies. So we're positioned geographically to work where we have a lot of need. Of course, opportunity gaps for students exist because of that, and so with other factors too, but it's not helping that we have that. So really neat thing that happened at the same time we got this grant, we also got a just over $2 million grant from the Mississippi Department of Ed. They leveraged ESSER funds to expand the teacher residency work that we were doing. And so we're specifically working with 7 school districts on that project to provide a graduate level residency that leads to teacher certification in elementary and special education. And Kevin, who's with me as well, he's with me often, he's my husband, but anyway, he also works on our campus as our senior coordinator for career services, and we've leveraged his time and expertise to serve as our recruitment and retention manager for the teacher residency. So partnerships have been established with 8 high-need school districts to begin this development of reliable teacher pipeline. And we have this variety of different pathways that we're working on. I mentioned PANTA already, the MSU teacher residency, the BAS to MAT, and the last area that we're really trying to dig into is this high school pipeline, because I know many of you have already been working in that world, but because we are a transfer campus, our focus has been on people with community college coming to us, and so now we're having to back up and think about how do we get from high school to that level. So lessons learned so far for us, that natural connection to CTE programs. When we first envisioned this, we were going to do these 4 regional convenings and talk about what we had and get knowledge from partners about what we could do. We've gotten more focused with that, and we found that meeting with these CTE people specifically is a tremendous resource. We've learned about making connection through existing networks. We were able to hire a part-time program manager for our grant, and we were able to get Christy Rowcliffe, who was a teacher and then a principal and then a federal programs person and even served as a superintendent briefly for her career. And so she's had a tremendous amount of connections that a lot of us did not have. And so, for example, one of our regional meetings that's going to actually happen next month, we pivoted to partnering with the Mississippi Association of School Superintendents. And what we're doing is a luncheon 3 different times during that conference with our superintendents that we already have partnerships with, and we're encouraging them to bring a friend. We're feeding them lunch and then creating an opportunity to have some conversations. Again, building network through existing relationships. Been doing a lot of work around overcoming institutional barriers, making sure that that pipeline exists seamlessly from one entity to the other. And then we're also learning that it's a lot easier to build upon prior successes. Our PANTA initiative has a very good reputation in the community. So when we come with these new conversations, people have heard about it and they want to talk to us about what other types of things we can do. I think that's it.